We're replacing the brake booster and master cylinder on this Alfa Spider over here. Oh, and check out this Abarth Heart shirt. Yeah, that's pretty sweet, huh? Merch link down in the description below. Well, let's get to it. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is use a turkey baster here to suck out all the fluid out of the reservoirs, both the clutch and the brake reservoir. Then I'll disconnect both of the brake lines and the clutch line down here. Oh yeah, you have to undo these wires from the little low brake fluid switch too. But yeah, because of the way the reservoir is designed, you're not going to be able to get all of the fluid out because it remains in the rear section of the reservoir there. But what you can do is just put your cap back on, and the reservoir is just held into the master cylinder with the rubber grommets. So like whenever you pull this guy out, you just have to quickly hold it over your container and let the back drain into it. And putting your cap back on makes it so it doesn't just like pour out immediately. It'll dribble out instead. Pulling the reservoir off will be pretty stiff, but if you get a large wrench and stick underneath these things, you know, right where the nipples are, you can get underneath and prise it up pretty easily without damaging that reservoir. Now, when it comes to the line nuts, I like using this locking wrench from Vice Grip instead of the typical flare nut wrenches. I find the flare nut wrenches still tend to round them off, but this thing is pretty darn sweet. This is probably like my third favorite tool. It just works. There'll be a link for it down in the description below. All right, with the lines undone, now we have to remove this nut right here. And there's two nuts back here. There's one right there, and then underneath these wires, there's another one. And there's two inside the pedal box that we have to remove too. One right here, and then another one on the other side over here. Hopefully I'm actually showing you guys that on camera. So I took this reservoir off its bracket to get a little bit more room too, because it was hitting the clutch master cylinder here. But as you can see, with those nuts undone, the whole pedal box, this is the back of the pedal box right here, but the whole pedal box is going to come out. It's going to take a lot of wiggling to get it out, so definitely going to have to do that off camera, but yeah, you guys can see what's going on. Now, you could keep trying to wiggle this thing out of there, but pulling it up just this amount is enough for you to be able to work on getting the booster disconnected from the pedal box. And I also think someone might have actually bent this clutch pedal a little bit to get more room in the pedals down there, because it kind of seems like they're splayed apart a little too much to be able to squeeze up out of this hole. But the next things we got to do is got to take this little safety wire off, and this should be a cotter pin, but you know, someone safety wired this at some point. And this just disconnects the clutch master cylinder from the pedal assembly, and then we got to take the nut that holds it to the brake pedal off, and then you have 4 of these nuts here to take off. And then that holds the brake booster on, and they're nicely marked green for us. All right, so now we need to take the clutch master cylinder off the old booster and transfer it over to the new one, and then we'll also have to put the new master cylinder for the brakes on the booster. But in order to do that, we're going to have to measure how deep the little piston is down in here and adjust the acorn nut so it just has like between 10 and 20 thou of clearance. There's a tool specifically made to do that, and makes it nice and easy. And of course, I can't find mine, so I can't demonstrate that for you, but I'll leave a link for it down in the description below. I'm gonna have to use like some calipers and like a straight edge and like figure it out, but it's a lot easier if you get the actual tool for it. So I recommend that tool in the link description below. Really, the only tricky part to getting this back together is getting the little spring cup back on there. That's gotta go on once you put the brake booster back onto the pedal box. You have to slip it using this slot over the shaft, and while you're kind of compressing the spring, kind of need like 3 hands to do it, but you know, we make it work. And the rest of it is just getting it bolted back up the way it was before, and then of course bleeding the brakes. And y'all know how to bleed brakes, so I'm not going to show you any of that. But yeah, that's all there is to it. Also, it's a good idea to replace the check valve for the brake booster too. Yeah, take the little bracket for this thing off and get it out of the way, and then the old one just unscrews and new one screws in its place. That's it. Oh yeah, there was definitely a bubble. Do it some more. Yeah, there's bubbles, all right. So I was having some trouble bleeding the clutch here, and one of the guys on the Alfa BB actually recommended jacking the back of the car up so that's at a slightly downward angle, because the clutch master cylinder here in the car, it actually sits like slightly tilted up in the front. And since I was doing it on my driveway here with a sloping downward in the back there, it kind of exacerbated the situation. But what can happen is that since it has that slightly upward tilt in the front of the master cylinder, it can catch a bubble inside there that's impossible to bleed out unless you tilt up the back of the car like that. But that seems to have done the trick. I love consulting the experts on the forums like Alfa BB and such. It's always a great resource. Oh yeah, and here's the torque specs if you need them. I ended up tightening up the clutch master bolts a little bit more. Face down, ass up, that's the way to bleed the clutch. Face down, ass up, that's the way to bleed the clutch. Face down, ass up, that's the way to bleed the clutch. Bleed the clutch, bleed the clutch, bleed the clutch.